American servicemen returned from the First World War only to find a new type of violent conflict waiting for them at home. An outbreak of racial violence known as the Red Summer occurred in 1919, an event that affected at least 26 cities across the United States. And here is that story. Many Black Americans were away from home during World War I due to fighting for a country that they called home. Racial tensions arose once military personnel came back home. There began an immense competition between whites and blacks that placed them in direct conflict with one another, leading to tragic results. Prior to the stiff conflict, the Great Migration was in full effect. World War I intensified the Great Migration. Black Americans migrated from the rural South to the industrial North and Midwest in hopes of escaping poverty and discrimination of Jim Crow laws. By the summer of 1919, approximately 500,000 Black Americans had resettled in northern cities. The northern whites, many of whom were newly arrived immigrants themselves, did not welcome the Black newcomers. Coming to the end of World War I, many whites feared that the return of tens of thousands of Black veterans would be unwilling to resubmit to traditional political and social subjugation in the United States. The whites bet it right, because the blacks were not willing to come back and take the same treatment. W.E.B. Du Bois famously called upon Black veterans to not simply return from fighting, but to return fighting. But the fear in the white man was stronger than the fight in the Black man. So many Black veterans were mistreated and in some cases attacked while in uniform. Lynchings increased from 64 in 1918 to 83 in 1919. Many of the dozens of incidents that occurred over the course of the year were made far worse because local, state, and federal officials hesitated in taking action or turned a blind eye to the violence. Racial violence broke out in some of the nation's most populous cities. A 4-day riot in Washington, D.C. began on July 19th when a rumor that Black men had assaulted a white woman. This incited mobs to attack local Black neighborhoods and assault random Black American individuals on the streets. The mobs were led by white off-duty sailors and recently discharged Army veterans. When the local police were overwhelmed by the mayhem, Washington's Black community band together to fight back, arming themselves with bats, clubs, pistols, and knives. Soon, Black mobs were attacking white passerbys just as indiscriminately as whites did to Blacks. In nearby Norfolk, Virginia, a parade celebrating the return of a unit of Black American troops from Europe turned into a bloody melee, and 2 Black servicemen were killed. Ultimately, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson had to order troops to secure the streets. Rioting erupted on July 27th when a Black teenager was drowned after being hit with stones when he and his friends drifted near a whites-only beach. Violent rioting lasted days, and the casualty count listed 38 fatalities, 23 Black and 15 white. About 1,000 Black families were made homeless by the burning and rampant destruction of Black American neighborhoods. Likely, the single deadliest incident of the Red Summer occurred in and around Elaine, Arkansas, on September 30th and October 1st, after a white law officer was killed in a shootout outside the Black sharecropper gathering. Upwards of 200 are believed to have lost their lives. Throughout the entirety of Red Summer, hundreds of people lost their lives, thousands were injured, and many more were forced to flee their homes. Yet, through it all, confidence and desire to fight back grew. In the streets, in the courts, and in the voting booth, for Black American communities across the country. The Red Summer saw Black populations fight back aggressively against racial violence and intimidations in ways that were not typical before. The Red Summer of 1919 did not intimidate Black America into submission, as their tormentors had hoped. Instead, Black Americans emerged from the violence of that bloody year with a greater sense of shared purpose, identity, and pride. This served as a vital foundation for the civil rights movement to come.